Good evening, and welcome to Exploring Black History at the College of Charleston and beyond. This program is brought to you by the College of Charleston Alumni Association with support from our generous annual sponsors. Thanks to our sponsors, we are able to broadcast this program live from PDA's COVID-safe studio in North Charleston, South Carolina, and record and post it to share with others. I'm Derrick Williams, president of the College of Charleston Alumni Association. Joining me tonight is Professor Emeritus Bernard Powers. Dr. Powers has taught history at the College of Charleston for nearly 30 years. He's the author of a book entitled Black Charlestonians. Most recently, he co-authored We Are Charleston, Tragedy and Triumph at Mother Emanuel. He also established the college's Center for Study of Slavery in Charleston. In our most recent alumni survey, Dr. Powers was named amongst the most highly regarded professors in our entire college. I'm very, very happy to present Dr. Powers this evening. In addition, Dr. Powers serves as Interim Chief Executive Officer of the International African American Museum, currently under construction on the Charleston waterfront. This is scheduled to open in 2022 in Charleston, and we're excited to have that open. We want to welcome Dr. Powers and thank you for agreeing to take us on this journey.
Sure. Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Now, Dr. Powers, I was so excited when I was asked to interview for this webinar, and for our audience here, I know that they're as excited. I will tell you, I've heard about you over many, many years, but this is the first time we've got to actually interact, so we're all looking forward to it. Yeah. Dr. Powers, tell us, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in the city of Chicago, the south side of Chicago, in fact.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know that you grew up there, spent many years there. How did you get to Charleston?
Well, Derrick, I went to graduate school at Northwestern University. Studied history there, eventually finished the PhD in American history. I had a concentration in 19th century U.S. history, and I developed a real interest in the period of the Civil War and Emancipation and Reconstruction. But I was interested in a couple of other subjects that I was able to pursue as a graduate student also. I was interested in urban history, particularly the development of cities and their African American populations in the 19th century. And there was something else that was very intriguing, and it was becoming an important area of study during the time period. And we're talking about the period of the early to the mid 1970s. And that was the transmission of traditional African culture to various places in the New World, South America, the Caribbean, the United States, and so on. And so when I began to read about Charleston, South Carolina, a place that I had never had an opportunity to visit, I realized that I could bring together all of my various interests in the 19th century, Civil War, Reconstruction era, as well as the survival of traditional African culture in the United States in this one city. And so it was that recognition of those things that propelled me to and gave me the incentive to come and visit Charleston for the first time in 1975. I'd never been to South Carolina before. And I was here for a week, and then I came the following year, 1976, and I lived in Charleston for about 6 months doing the major part of the research project that eventuated in my degree, and then the book that you referenced, Black Charlestonians, also. So that's how I got here for the first time. I really liked Charleston and the Low Country, And as a relatively young man, I was about 26 or 27 years old at the time, I made a pledge to myself that when I retired, I was going to retire to the city of Charleston. That's how much I love this place.
So you were speaking into existence already, even before it happened.
Yes. And as I tell people, since I worked at the College of Charleston for almost 30 years now, I got here a little bit early.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, so your studies began at Northwestern
Yes.
early 70s. So this would have been obviously after the actual civil rights movement, and
Yes.
I guess integration had occurred. Was that one of the impetuses for your want to study this area?
Yes, because there was really during that time period a flourish of scholarship and interest in African American history and the way in which it reshaped our understanding of American history. And that interest was really propelled by the momentum of the civil rights movement and the kind of intellectual ferment that surrounded the advancements that were occurring not only on the legal front, in terms of voting rights and the downfall of Jim Crow, but also in terms of the kinds of demands that students were making also. As they integrated traditionally white institutions, they were demanding that their lives, their stories, and those of their ancestors be reflected in the curriculum that they were studying in these schools. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I believe your time at Northwestern, you not only got your undergraduate degree there, but you got your PhD as well.
Well, I got my undergraduate degree at a small liberal arts college in Minnesota by the name of Gustavus Adolphus College, a small Swedish Lutheran school, but did the MA and PhD at Northwestern. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, when you got to Charleston, what were some of these subjects that you taught there?
Yeah, well, at the College of Charleston, for most of the time that I was part of the regular faculty, I taught a survey of African American history. It was a two-part course, or a two-part sequence. The first part began with the African background and came into the period of the American Civil War. And then the second part picked up with the Civil War and came to the present time. So I did that course regularly. Also did some specialty courses in African American history. So I taught courses on slavery. I did African American historical biography. I taught a course on essentially the Black Atlantic. In other words, the experiences of African people in the Caribbean, in the United States, in parts of Europe, and so on, that whole Atlantic rim. And I also did a civil rights course also. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I'm mainly an 18th and 19th century student, and kind of toward the latter part of my career, I began to move a bit into the 20th century and added the civil rights course on.
Absolutely. Now, besides your teaching, what other responsibilities or jobs did you have for the college?
Yeah, and so at one point I directed the master's program in history. I did that for about 8 years, and we offer a joint program with the Citadel, and so that is a good opportunity for us because it allows us to pool together the faculties of both universities.
Absolutely. Right.
And so I did that, and I also served as associate chairman of the department for a number of years, and actually interim chair while the department looked for a permanent chair. So I had some administrative experience also.
Yeah. Well, we were fortunate to have you at the College of Charleston for many, many years. And one of the things you and I talked about, I was an English major, but
Yeah.
I did not take some of your courses. I think I would have enjoyed them a lot. Now, in terms of your teaching career, how is teaching at the College of Charleston different from maybe some other institutions you've taught at?
Yeah, and so I taught African American history at Northeastern Illinois University, which is in Chicago.
The Golden Eagles, I think they are.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's right.
I had to look that one up.
Okay. So yeah, I was there 11 or 12 years, and taught African American history there. But also, I was the for the history department. I was the local Africanist, also, and that's kind of interesting too, because when I was in graduate school, someone who had a specialization in African American history was also expected to do some training in African history, so that you would be prepared to at least teach some basic courses in that area. And
Okay.
so at Northeastern Illinois, I did both of those areas as well as U.S. history. One of the things that I found quite a contrast between teaching the subject there and teaching it here is that at Northeastern Illinois at the time, and I don't know how it is now, but at this time, there were virtually no white students that took African American courses. But when I came to the College of Charleston, it was not unusual for the class to have 50% white students. And I really think that really says something about the difference between the North and the South even today.
Yeah.
And what that says is, even in the modern period, there are lots of white Southerners who recognize the kind of organic connections that blacks and whites have had in the South historically, and it's been very different in the North. And so, therefore, they really saw investigating African American history as a way of also learning something about their larger experiences too, as Southern people. Yeah.
Never thought about that, but I think that's an excellent point, because we probably historically have thought the more progressive minded people would be up north or go to schools up north, but I've never actually heard someone say that.
Yeah,
There were not any white students attending your classes up north. Which
That's
is,
right. That's right.
kind
There
of
were very few at that time, and as I say, now obviously there's grown and developed a lot of interest amongst white students even in the North now. But at that time, I had very few at that time and at Northeastern Illinois.
In terms of the African American experience when you first started, how has that changed over time as you were teaching down at the college?
Yeah, well, when I started, there were three of us. Well, actually, there were two of us that were doing coursework in areas related to this subject. The late Alpha Ba in the history department. You might have known him or heard of him.
No, I know who that is. Yes.
Yeah, and Dr. Ba did African history, and I did African American, and then at Avery, the director of Avery, Marvin Delaney came,
Yeah.
and Marvin really did African American. He did the 20th century. I did mainly 18th and 19th century. But what has happened over the years is we have many more faculty members who teach other aspects of the African and African American experience. And so, and this gives you, I think, a good sense of how what we offer at the college has really grown and blossomed because, I can remember it was probably the spring of 1993, my second semester there. We implemented an African American Studies minor, and Eugene Hunt
Yes.
from the English department,
Absolutely.
who I think was certainly one of the earliest and perhaps the first tenured African American faculty member there. And so Eugene Hunt was involved in promoting this, and we got that implemented in the spring of 1993. And of course, now there's a whole African American Studies major, right? We have an African American Studies program. We have an African Studies program, a separate unit. We've got a Caribbean Studies minor, I think. And so we really have seen the blossoming of this area, and in terms of teaching, far greater sophistication, more courses, more faculty members, doing really a variety of things. Literature has really blossomed. And
Seems like there's been a lot of crossover.
Yes.
I know as I was taking English courses there, Professor Simon Lewis
yes.
does a wonderful course on African literature.
Yes, that's right.
And but it seems like as the departments grew and our understanding grew, there were more courses, so you weren't just
That's
confined to the history department
right.
to learn about certain things.
Oh, yes. In fact, just several weeks ago, I was talking with Angela Halfacre, and Angela used to head up the master's program in environmental studies, and they did a variety of things in that program, and one of the theses that she directed had to do with the use of sweetgrass in the construction of the sweetgrass baskets that are
right.
sown over in Mount Pleasant and all along Highway 17 and so on.
Absolutely.
So that's just another way. And here, someone might say, well, environmental studies, that doesn't have anything to do with African American history or culture, but it does.
Right.
And that's just one example.
Yeah, amazing. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of changes since you first started, but what other things have you done to contribute, either from a curriculum standpoint or either on the campus? What other things have you been involved with?
Yeah, well, as I have promoted my own research activities, I've gotten students involved in various projects that I've worked on. I've directed students' theses and senior papers in the history department. And of course now I'm heading up the Center for the Study of Slavery in Charleston, which we started in the fall of 2018. So we are still in our infancy and defining ourselves and so on. But that project is very important because we are part of a consortium of over 50 universities that are examining the role that slavery played in higher education, mainly in the United States, but there are some universities in Canada and in the UK that are also part of the same consortium. And at the College of Charleston, we have about 20 faculty members that are working with the center, and we're doing a number of things. We are conducting research, looking at, for example, the use of slave labor in the construction of some of the earliest buildings on the campus. We are looking at buildings on campus that have African American histories themselves. Perhaps they may have been owned by African American owners before the college acquired them. We are looking at the way in which African American history can be infused into the tours that are offered of the campus. And also, when one thinks about our center, and it's called the Center for the Study of Slavery in Charleston, that is somewhat of a misleading
Okay.
title, in the sense that, yes, we do focus on slavery, but we also look at the legacy of slavery. And when you think of the legacy of slavery, it casts a long shadow all the way down to the present time. And so the questions about race relations on the present campus and the climate, the racial climate and atmosphere and all of that, these are part of the legacies and the consequences of the fact that slavery existed at one point in time.
Right.
And so finally, since the institution of slavery and racial discrimination created social harms, one of the things that the center also is seeking to do in conjunction, not only with the college, but with the surrounding community, is to figure out some ways in which we can alleviate some of the harms and adverse consequences that have existed as a result of racial discrimination, which was a product of slavery at one point in time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the Center for the Study of Slavery is more encompassing than just focusing on slavery itself.
Absolutely.
The ramifications and effects of it as well is important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's absolutely right.
One of the things that thought about as we were talking earlier this week and kind of prepping for this, here we are in Charleston. Obviously, so much history here. One of the original 13 colonies. Obviously, the major bottleneck for slavery and slaves being brought here to our city. We're at the College of Charleston, 13th oldest school in this country. Actually formed and founded before our country was even formed.
Yes.
What history on the college's campus itself, how does that enhance what you are doing now with your center and in some sense this collaborative effort with other colleges?
Oh, yes, sure. Well, I mentioned the consortium that we are a part of, and it's known as the University Studying Slavery Consortium, over 50 universities. Well, there are 5 of us right in South Carolina. So Furman and the Citadel and USC, let's see, how many is that? And there's one other one.
One more besides us.
Yes, and let's see, that name is escaping me right now, but I may think, but there are 5 of us in the state. And so we're looking to collaborate with one another, share information, learn from our respective approaches, so that we may want to borrow a technique that they've used at Clemson is the other university.
Clemson, okay.
At Clemson, and incorporate that way of investigating the role of slavery on our campus, and we might want to do that over at the Citadel. We're also working with the new museum that's in the process. The International African American Museum is scheduled to be open in 2022, but it's already beginning to do some programming. So we're not going to wait until we have the building fully constructed to begin to work with people. And so, in fact, the center this past spring, we had a program, symposium, in fact, that we were going to offer jointly with the International African American Museum on our campus. And it was a program that surrounded the question of reparations and what reparations consist of, and so on and so forth, kind of getting at the social justice aspects of repairing the harms that have resulted from systematic racism in our society. And so that's one example of a collaborative activity that we had in the works. Unfortunately, the pandemic came along and caused that. But
Changed a lot of things.
yes, it has. It has. But we are looking to perhaps be able to offer that this spring, perhaps with another university in the metropolitan area. So a lot of what we're doing is based on and promotes collaboration, and it will present numerous opportunities for discussions, for people to think in new ways about their lives, their futures, the communities that they're a part of,
Right.
and how we can all be part of a solution to this difficult conundrum that we've inherited, but we have to solve in order to make the kind of progress that we need to make as a society, and that college is playing an important role in doing so.
Well, it's good to hear that, we're at the forefront
Yes.
of pushing this forward. Because one of the things I've thought about, even here in South Carolina, is the experience maybe in the low country may not be the same as in the Midlands where I live or in our upstate areas. So
That's right.
it is good to hear different colleges are on board with
Yes.
this, because I think the more information, the more knowledge that we have in these areas in this subject, I think enhances what you all do, or
Sure.
or the historical nature of what we can find out. So
That's right.
I think
That's right.
great.
That's right. And that will, lead to greater cooperation, collaboration between our universities in the state, and also the museum is, although it's located in Charleston, and there'll be plenty on the Low Country and this area, it's focused the entire state. And as we look at the history of the state, that's going to be the springboard to exploring the larger international experience of African people in the Caribbean, the Atlantic Rim, including Europe and Canada, and so on.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, our talk tonight is about exploring Black history
Yes.
at the College of Charleston and beyond our borders. How has interest in African American studies and history grown in the larger metropolitan area since you've been here?
It has. It has grown tremendously. And Derrick, as I mentioned, I came to Charleston for the first time in the middle 1970s. And I can remember I took the boat ride out to Fort Sumter. And on that boat ride, the National Park Service ranger kind of gave a lecture on the coming of the Civil War to prepare you to take the tour of the fort when you got out there. And Derrick, I remember this just as clearly as anything that you have said this evening. When that ranger went through the various causes of the American Civil War, the person talked about taxes and states' rights and two different cultures, North and South, but there was a key factor that was never mentioned. Not a word about slavery whatsoever as a driving force for the coming of the American Civil War.
Right.
That was the middle of the 1970s. Now we have a Fort Sumter Visitors Center, which is it's almost adjacent to the site where we're constructing the museum. And when you go in there is a sophisticated introduction to a broadly based and comprehensive treatment of the coming of the Civil War, and slavery is appropriately incorporated into the several motive forces
Right.
for the war to come. And I can let you in on something also, that one of the park rangers who was involved in designing the script and that presentation is one of my former students.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So your impact
Yes.
lives on and continues on.
That's right.
That's a fascinating point that you just talked about. So I would imagine then in the 70s, even at historical sites, I guess there was this, maybe this ignorance that slavery in and of itself was,
Yes.
the war between our states. That was one of the main impetuses. So I
That's
was kind
right.
of fascinated to actually hear that.
That's right, and likewise, if you took tours of the historic homes in downtown Charleston, or if you went out to the plantations, for example, out on Highway 61, if enslaved people were mentioned at all, they were never called slaves; they were called servants, and typically there was very little, if anything, said about them. Of course, now this has changed dramatically. It has changed dramatically. And so if you go out to Middleton Place, Drayton Hall, Boone Hall, Magnolia, Gardens, all of these places, McLeod, Plantation, they have African American focused tours.
Right.
Where you can spend an hour learning about the African American experience at these sites. And the big push that we want now is, while we like the African American focused tours, we also want to ensure that black experience is incorporated into the tours of the homes and the grounds.
Absolutely.
So that the visitors to these places are essentially required, regardless of how they go through the tour, to learn something about this experience.
Right.
And that's the way it would have been during, let's say, the 18th century or the antebellum period. Visitors to these homes or plantations, there would have been no escaping the presence of black people there, who were the vast majority of the residents. So in many ways, this experience has been embraced wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times I think dealing with history, painful as some of it is being honest about what that history was. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
we can't go back and change it, but that doesn't mean that we can't recognize exactly what was going on. And I think a full understanding is, when you go to these type historical sites, knowing exactly everything that actually happened there, not
Yes.
not a glorified or Hollywood type version.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Gone with the Wind, and so on and so forth. Those days are really over with, and I'm happy to say that in the course of my career, I have been periodically called upon by some of these historic sites to do some consulting, offer some advice, and so on. And I have colleagues in the history department and some that I know from other departments, anthropology, for example, that have similarly been called upon to work with these sites to improve the visitor experience there.
Absolutely.
And to heighten and make more sophisticated the way they present the African American experience.
Right. One of obviously the most tragic recent events that's happened in our state in the Charleston area is the mother, Emmanuel.
Yes.
What happened there. From a historical standpoint in dealing with some of the issues and some of your teachings of these years, how does an event like this, a tragedy, maybe help enhance how we understand our own history or even dealing with that?
Sure. What happened there really opened up many people's eyes to the ferocity and the virulence of racism even in the 21st century in America. And some people who really hadn't thought about it were forced to question whether the way they had lived their lives and the way they had, and whether or not perhaps they had insulated themselves from the problem and therefore contributed to it. And so lots of people, lots of white Americans began to rethink their relationship to the ongoing practice of American racism, and they began to realize that just because they didn't see people wearing white robes and rallying around burning crosses, that didn't mean that racism was gone. It just assumed different forms. And you know, some of the recent ferment and everything surrounding the Confederate monument is part of the reverberations of that awareness, because people recognize that some of those monuments and places and names and so on and so forth represent the continuation of that series of racist practices that suggested something about American life and American society that needed to be questioned and then corrected. And so Mother Emanuel really triggered a wave of introspection throughout the South that's still going on now. Of course, that, you know, it started with the tragedy there, and then the Confederate flag being removed from the State House grounds here, and most recently, John C. Calhoun coming down in Marion Square, something that I thought I would never see.
Right.
And that
And all of this just steps away from our geographical borders of the college.
That's right. Exactly right.
You know,
exactly
I
right.
think, you know, for an institution like ours, which is a liberal arts type college, where I would say that my understanding and a broad-based knowledge of our world and how to interact in this world, I gained a lot of it there in one of the most historical cities in our country, but dealing with a lot of historical tragedies here. It makes for kind of an interesting dichotomy we've all had to deal with. Couple that with the statute and Mother Emanuel not being very far, I think.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
From a historical standpoint, that in of itself, and then from a humanistic standpoint, I think we all have a shared experience or some connection to it.
Yes, we do. We do. And you know, that's the thing about Charleston. There's so much African American history throughout the city, but a lot of it is hidden. A lot of it is hidden. You have to know where to look to see it. And so all of our efforts at the center, the African American Studies program at the college, the museum, and not just us, they're doing things over at the Citadel also, are designed to make the invisible much more visible. So, you know, and one of the most glaring examples in terms of a structure is the old Citadel building right there, you know, 1 block from our campus. And that place is constructed 20 years in the aftermath of the Denmark-Vesey slave conspiracy. Well, now it's the Embassy Suites Hotel, and people walk past that all the time having no idea that it's a very important African-American history site.
Wow.
You know.
Wow.
And if you know where to look, if you look on the south side of that building, there's a little plaque about the size of a notebook. And it has the whole timeline for that 19th century building. And it starts with the year 1822. And it says, they began to fortify this area in the aftermath of the Denmark-Vesey slave conspiracy discovery. It's right on the building there.
Oh, wow.
So it's an example of a hidden historic site that we're trying to give a higher profile to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will look for that the next time I'm there.
Yes.
Because I did not know
That's
that
right
until
there.
you just
Yeah,
said that.
that's right. That's right.
What kind of opportunities exist on our campus and in other places for students to develop skills and learn about some of these subjects you've taught for years?
Sure, sure. Well, one of the things that the history department has done at the college has established a series of internships that are offered in collaboration between the department and various historic sites around the city and throughout the metropolitan area. So we've had students work at the South Carolina Historical Society, the Charleston Museum, Historic Charleston Foundation, and sometimes they work on African American oriented projects if that's what they're interested in. It could be other historic episodes and and subjects that they have an interest in, or preservation. We've had a few students from the Citadel. We've had some from the college to work over at the museum, to work with us doing internships over there also. And one of the things that our Center for the Study of Slavery hopes to do down the road is to offer a course on the history of the College of Charleston. Now, some people who don't know any better might think that that would be a parochial kind of a course, but it really would not be. The idea is you could take the College of Charleston and use that as a center or focal point for looking at crucial issues in American history throughout our history. The American Revolution, obviously the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, the Civil Rights era. All of these things could be explored through our campus and through the history of our institution. And that's how we're thinking about that. The other thing is, we have a committee at the center that is doing research, to discover issues of slavery and race-related matters on the campus and in the surrounding areas. So the faculty members who have undertaken that work will use students that have an interest in those subjects to partner with them. And it'll be an opportunity for the students to learn research techniques that'll be helpful to them if they're history majors or regardless of what their majors are. So there are a lot of opportunities for students to participate in this work.
Well, something that you just said I never thought about, but on our campus itself, and from a historical standpoint, obviously this is our 250th year, formed in 1770. So before the country's even birthed in 1776,
that's right.
Our college was around. But if you look from a historical standpoint, pretty much every major event, there's something that probably happened in Charleston that directly either impacted it or the college was impacted by that. I know in Dr. Morrison's book, Nan Morrison's book on her history, one of the things I learned was during different time periods, World War I, World War II, if students got drafted, the college during those years for certain time periods may not have been open. And obviously there's portions during the civil rights movement, certain things happened, administrative changes and certain things that were done. I've never thought about that, that you really could use our city and the College of Charleston itself as a historical teaching point for this country. Because really being an original colony, birth of our nation, and then everything else.
That's right.
We've had these flashpoints in history that I think our college has kind of highlighted certain things.
Yes, yeah, and let's think about it this way. The Avery Research Center, which is a part of our library today. That division of the library which focuses on the African American experience in South Carolina mainly. That is not only part of the library, but it is a very important, as you know, historic site that really dates back to the immediate aftermath of the American Civil War. It was the first school in Charleston for African American students expressly. And not just a school, but a school with an advanced curriculum. It had the normal designation. The Avery Normal Institute is what it's called. So the expectation was that if you enrolled in Avery, you already had the rudiments, the lower level skills that you acquired, and then you went on and you pursued higher level courses,
Right.
and you learned how to become a teacher, or you did college preparatory courses at Avery. And students left Avery and they went on to Howard University and Talladega and similar, and Fisk University and so on and so forth. So right there, here is a part of the College of Charleston, a building that has a wonderful African American history that really continued as an independent entity until just before it was acquired by the college, and it was acquired by the college in the middle 1980s.
Yeah.
So
Well, you
yeah.
told me a fascinating story about Avery and trying to find it when you first got here.
Yes, yes.
Would you just share part of that?
Yes, because yes, and this would have been in the late 80s, and I happened to be in Charleston for a research trip, and I'd heard about the Avery Institute, and so I was on the campus, and I was asking various people that I ran into, people who, some of the men had on ties, so they looked like they were authority figures, and others, and no one knew where Avery was. So I kind of finally wandered into the old science building, and I saw one of the African American custodians there, and I asked him if he knew where the Avery Institute was, and he says, "Oh yeah, sure. Just walk right on down Bull Street. It's the pink building down. And you'll run right into it." Yeah. And of course, for him, he knew Avery because he was probably
Right.
part of the community and grew up there,
Absolutely.
and all of that.
Well, with so much history there, it was a little bit harder to find than you would have imagined.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. That's
Now,
absolutely.
For our African American alumni at our college, what message would you give to them at this time, and particularly to those who might have graduated a while ago, just like myself?
Yes. Well, the college has grown tremendously in terms of what we've been talking about this evening. As we said, there are more African American faculty members on the campus representing far more disciplines than were the case when I started 30 years ago, but not just African American faculty members, but faculty members of all races that have an interest in what we've been talking about and who make a contribution, who make a scholarly and a pedagogical contribution to these subjects. And so, I mean, if you have an interest in African art, African history, learning about the Caribbean, learning about the experience of black people in the Atlantic Rim, if you have an interest in obviously African American literature, but for example, I have a colleague in the African American Studies program, Dr. Anthony Green, who does a course on African Americans in sports. He does a course on African Americans, I believe, and comics. I mean, just about anything you can think of, people are studying. And this really shows a broadening and a
Right.
deepening of the curricular offerings that are available at the College of Charleston. And this really is the fruit and the maturation of the civil rights movement when you think about it. because, when black students got admitted to the college, in fact, this is what happened in my experience. This is why I've been at the college. Because students who were admitted, eventually they raised the question. They said, well, why aren't we present in the curriculum? And so, by fits and drabs, so to speak, courses were added, and eventually the college was interested in hiring me and others,
Right.
and that's how we got to where we are today, And so we've got this new center. The Avery Research Center it's undergone a 2-year renovation.
Yes.
Lots of programming will go on over there. And we have, and when I say we, I mean those of us who do these subjects, we have important connections to other institutions of higher learning
Right.
in the city and around the nation.
Yeah.
And around the nation. And all of this is to the great benefit of our students
student.
and the larger
Yeah.
community that we hope will take advantage.
Well, it sounds like
College.
some of us as alumni need to re-enroll and take some of these other courses.
Yes.
Because it's a plethora now
Yeah.
that when I was coming through, I don't know that all of those were actually
Yes,
there.
yeah, that's right.
Um,
That's right.
Kind of along that same vein for the Center for the Study of Slavery, what can alumni do, if anything, to assist or maybe help with those efforts?
Yeah. Well, go to our website, which is right now under reconstruction, but we are hoping to put together a much more sophisticated website. So take a look there.
Okay.
You'll see our programs that are up and coming. You'll see the kind of latest information that we can provide you about our subject. And also, there is a way to make a contribution, a financial contribution, through our website. So take a look at that also.
Absolutely. Dr. Powers, what would be something about the College of Charleston? You've told us something about in the city where the MC Suites is, but maybe something at the College of Charleston as it relates to African American history that most of us may not know.
Sure. Well, a couple of things. One is, I think about this all the time. The building right on St. Philip Street, where the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences
Yeah.
has his office now. That is a building that has an African American history before it was owned by the college that dates back to the period before the American Civil War. Was owned by a free black woman, I believe in the 1850s, as early as the 1850s. And she was a pastry cook or a chef. And that building was passed down in her family for a period of time, and really until the modern era, maybe the 1970s, and the college acquired that building. And so whenever I go in there, I think about that history and that heritage. And that's one of the things that we want to do on the campus. We want to provide signage so that passersby learn some things about the buildings on our campus.
Absolutely.
The other thing, just very quickly, is that the library is constructed on a site that, and some people know this, on a site that was formerly owned by the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church acquired that property from African Americans that had a burial ground there.
Wow.
That dated back to the end of the 18th century. In fact, when the construction was done for our library there was some human remains found. And so, for example, if you go behind the library and to the green space there, you'll see some monuments that refer to the old burial grounds that were located there. But unless you really know the history, you look at those memorial stones and they really don't have
Yeah.
much in the way of significance
Absolutely.
for you. So we have to have a way to tell a more complete story of the sacred ground that the library occupies today. And so that's another very important space on the campus.
Well, we won't pass by it anymore without knowing something else about it.
Good. Good.
Dr.
Good.
Powers, I can't thank you enough for sharing your incredible insights with us and to our history and our community and our college. We know our audience appreciates it, and we hope you will join us again soon. So thank you so much.
Well, I certainly look forward to it, and thank you so very much for the gracious invitation.
Absolutely. On behalf of the nearly 95,000 members of our Alumni Association, thank you for joining us this evening. We hope you will join us again very soon on October 29th for our next webinar with my friend and alumni, Dr. Michelle Cooper, class of 1995, where she will be discussing the CFC's path towards equity and opportunity. Good night.